Hi there, everyone. My name is Jacob, and I am the advocacy manager for the San Diego County Bicycle Coalition. We put on bike related events throughout the county of San Diego, also online once a week. Today, we're going live today with Kevin to discuss Bike Theft Awareness Month, where we're going to be talking about locking up your bike and different ways to do that. Hi, Kevin.
Hello. Thanks for. I mean, you have to be here, but thanks for hosting. Thanks for helping.
It's good to be here with you.
Cool. Should we jump into it?
Let's do it.
Let me switch my camera to the cool virtual one. Look at this. Ooh. So, my goal for myself is to keep this brief. We'll see how well I do. So, I don't have as exciting of a visual as we had last week. And last week we had Sylvie strip a bicycle down to its bare bones in 5 minutes. It was very cool to watch. And that was a bike that was still locked up, in fact. And so that's, I recommend, if you're not watching this live, go back, pause this video, go and watch that first one, because it's got some good stuff in it. And then continue with this one, which is a little bit more specific about bike locks themselves and how to use them, which ones you should be using, is there a specific brand, where should I buy them, how do they work, all of that stuff. So to start things off, let's talk about when you should be using a bike lock. The stories that I've heard fairly frequently from people about times that they've had their bike stolen, this is my example of what it looks like. This is what happens after you get your bike stolen, is you put an Instagram post about it. The times that they've had their bike stolen are when they said they were just going to go into the store for 1 second. They leave the bike leaning up against the window, even like they're like, I can still see it, it's fine. They turn around to order the coffee, they turn back around and the bike's gone. So every single time that you're not touching the bicycle should be locked. This includes in your garage. One of the most frequent places that bikes are stolen from is garages. So having the bike locked in some fashion, even there, is a good thing. As far as the specific type of lock, there are absolutely different types, and there are absolutely different uses for each one of those types. So, if you're using a entire big thick chain for a tricycle, that's probably a little bit of overkill. But if you're wondering about what type of bike lock you need, then it depends on a couple different things. One, how long is the trip that you're taking? And that's a good question to ask, because it also includes things like, how much weight am I carrying? If I get a big, giant, thick chain lock like this one, then that's not one that I want to carry with me on a super long trip. And then with that, if I'm going on a very long trip but I'm never ever getting off the bicycle at all at any point, then that's different than a trip where I'm riding somewhere, I'm going to get off the bike, lock it, and walk away. If you are doing that, how long are you leaving the bike for? Are you leaving the bike overnight? That's very different than just leaving it for a few minutes. How much money do I want to spend? The sort of catchphrase I've heard is the lighter the bike, the heavier the lock. Or the more money that you spend on a bike, the more money you should spend on a lock. I think people say a certain percentage. But suffice to say, it's going to be an investment. And if you're only investing $10 in a lock, then that's only, the only value you're going to get out of it. And then also, who's coming with me? I have people that I ride with who always forget to bring locks. And so finding a lock that you have that is able to lock up more than one bike at once, if you're traveling with more than one person, is sometimes a good thing. So that's as far as reasons why you would pick a different kind. But within that, there are also, let's see here, places that you can buy those locks when you do choose what kind you want. So if you buy a lock online, then it makes it harder to figure out. It could be a brand that but there's such a thing as knockoffs. I mean, if you're going on like wish.com and like finding the most, best bargain possible, then this is maybe not the place to skimp, is on a lock. Buying local is always a good thing. Getting to know your local shop is a good thing. whichever shop it is. If you've never been there before, just go in and say hi, get to know them. They're going to have recommendations for things, and some of the things they recommend will be more expensive than you want, and some of the things they recommend won't be as expensive as you want. There's a huge range when it comes to this hobby and every other hobby as well. So figuring out what that range is and being able to hold the things in your hand and really get a sense of what their heft is and how well they're going to work is. In fact, I've got as something to hold while I present, but this is a little thin cable lock. You can see it's no longer connected to anything, and that's because this is a cable lock that's been cut. One of the things I like about this is it feels, it's a thicker than a piece of licorice. Is that a universal unit of measurement? It's thicker than a piece of licorice. But when you look down the barrel at it, the amount of thickness that is due to the rubber around the outside versus the amount of thickness that's the actual metal inside is somewhat striking. So if you are holding a lock in your hand and it feels nice and big and thick, that may not actually mean that it's got that much non-cuttable material in it. It could be due to something else. So not skimping on a brand, not skimping on price in general is probably going to end up being a good thing. And local bike shops are good. Supporting local is good. Find out who they are, get to know them. And when you have an issue with your bike later on, if it's something small, they're always going to be able to be there to help you out, which is great. So we're going with how to use the lock. Before I do that, let me move back because I feel like I have some examples and I want to show those off before we get into the specifics of how to use each one. So I showed you the thin rope lock, the cable lock. There's, they come in extremely thin, sections as well. I've got a really little tiny one here. These aren't useless. It's not like they shouldn't exist at all, because different locks are for different types of things. So that situation where you literally are running into the store for 2 seconds to get a bottle of water and come right back out, maybe something thin like this does make sense, especially when combined with a stronger lock. So using the thicker U-shaped lock, like this, on the front wheel and the frame, and then using a thinner lock just to add a second layer of protection is something that absolutely makes sense. That being said, one of the kinds I like to hang out with is these big, thick chain locks. So the cool thing about these specifically that I like, is that when you wear it around your chest and your shoulders, you look like you're in the movie Mad Max. You can also, it makes you look intimidating. It sounds cool. Also, it weighs, more than you probably want to carry for any kind of long trip. But if I was going on a short trip and I was leaving my bike for a long time, then I would look to something thicker like this. Using more than one lock at once is something that absolutely makes sense. So if you've got that big, thick chain lock, then combining it with something smaller makes sense. If you're only using something small, here I've got another little cut lock here. This, seems like it would work well for a short trip, and it would, or a short stop, and it would work well for a short stop until it gets cut. And so the amount of time that it takes someone to go from seeing your bike to riding away on your bike is absolutely less time than you think. And I've watched security footage of friends' bikes getting stolen, and it takes zero time at all. It's fairly impressive how efficient these people are about this stuff. Another broken lock. Look at that. Very sad and scary. And I always thought this was really cute. It's like it's a lock for a bike for a mouse. No, just kidding. That's a U-lock that goes on the chain lock and holds it together and prevents it from being able to be snipped as easy as it could if it was something thin like this. Angle grinders aren't going to work well on chain locks like that. They'll move around too much, whereas an angle grinder will work better on a U-shaped lock like this. Oops, wrong button. That's okay. On a U-lock like this. There you go. Abus are friends of ours. I had a hat from them and I forgot to put it on, but they sent us some cool information about bike locks, and so we thank them for that. Okay, let's move into how to actually use the lock. The times that you should use the lock is every time. And no matter the type of lock, the thing you should be paying attention to is what on the bike is removable. So if you only lock the frame of the bicycle, then you'll only have a frame of the bicycle when you get back. If you only lock the wheel of the bicycle, then it's absolutely possible that you'll only have a wheel when you get back. And it's hard to ride a wheel. So, not only that, making sure that the thing that you're locking it to is sturdy as well. You can see here this metal pole is bent. This, if it was, a more expensive bicycle, someone was really motivated to get to, if you're locking your bike to a thin tree, if you're locking your bike to a wooden post, those are things that can be cut. And so that's a weak point that you'd want to look out for. So here's a good example of a good way to lock. Oops, I keep hitting the wrong button. This is a good example of a good way to lock a bicycle. The things to notice here are, one, they're using more than one lock at a time. So you've got one lock on the front, holding the front wheel, and you've got one lock on the back, holding the frame of the bicycle and the back wheel. That back lock is going through the entire frame of the bicycle, and it's going through the wheel, so that's holding that together. And then it's got a second lock holding the front wheel that's completely independent of everything else, which is very cool. So what that means is, if someone did take the time to cut one of these locks, they came prepared with some special tool that made it really easy to cut one of these types of locks, they've still got the other one to deal with. One of the things that we talked more about in the previous video than we did in this one, or will in this one, is in addition to something that locks the bike itself, there's also ways to lock down components of the bicycle. So I know people that'll take the seat of the bike off with them, take it off and take it with them into the business. And that makes it easier to make your bike less desirable than someone else's. Because if you're going to steal a bike and there's a bike that has no seat and a bike that has a seat, you're probably going to steal the bike that has the seat on it. So take the front wheel off and take that in with you. Take the front wheel off and then lock that to the bike separately. All these things are things that are going to make it take more time to steal the bike, or at least take more time to go from not being able to touch the bike to riding away on it. So I don't know if you've ever heard me do any kind of presentation. I've made this joke and you've heard it before, but I'm going to say it again. It reminds me of the idea that if you are in a group of people who are running away from a bear, you don't have to be the fastest person in the group. You have to not be the slowest person in the group. And the same principle applies to a group of bicycles. If you're the most desirable bike in the bunch, then you're the bike that the people are going to target. So if you have a fancy bike, I know people that'll wrap their bike in duct tape. I know people that will do what they can to make their bike look uglier. But suffice to say, a heavy lock functions as lock itself, but it also functions as a preventative. Because if you are someone who's going to steal a lock or steal a bike and there's a big, thick, heavy lock on it, that's just seeing it is the thing that's going to prevent you from taking it, in addition to the fact that it is actually going to be harder to take that bicycle.